The Orlando Magic are on the rise in the Eastern Conference and are really starting to develop with their core young pieces when staying healthy to be a legitimate threat down the line. And with adding some key pieces on the edges, this team could take that next step to really be a powerhouse. So we're going to dive in and explore what the Orlando Magic could really consider out on the trade market at pieces they could look at, possible free agents, draft picks, and even players they could trade out to really bolster this roster and get this team to that next direction and next step into contending in the East. We'll be diving into that today. So if you're an Orlando Magic fan and you are tuning into this video, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section if I did a good job with the Magic or if I did a bad job with the Magic and predicting their off season. If you guys are new to the channel or if you have seen these videos before, we do this series new here on the Switch City where we're diving in looking at every team's offseason breakdown, and we've already dived in to around half the league already, so if you want to go check out those videos, they'll be down below in the playlist as well. But without further ado, let's dive in and let's explore this Orlando Magic team. So like I said in the introduction, the Orlando Magic last season had a pretty solid season, and they finished overall 7th in the Eastern Conference, finishing 41-41, but dealt with a ton of injuries throughout the year that really limited them and also had some key discrepancies with one aspect of their game in the shooting department. They didn't really have that many shooters. It was put on display versus the Boston Celtics, where they lost in 5 games of the first round, but they gave them a good physical defensive matchup where both wings, and Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero, were able to take care of the job and hold their own versus 2 of the top tiers wings in the entire NBA and defending NBA champions in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And that gives me that upside and that potential for this team to be a dominant powerhouse for the future and to be that new team really dominating this Southeast division. If we want to look at the Orlando Magic's, salary cap and looking at their breakdowns, once again, shout out to Bobby Marks or an ESPN, whoever makes these graphics, so they do a fantastic job. But as we can see with the Orlando Magic, they are at $207 million currently at the moment, putting them right underneath the second apron, putting them as a first apron team with the extensions of Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner kicking in with them making the playoffs. But as we can see with the Orlando Magic, a majority of their roster will be staying put. Obviously, their key core guys in Suggs, Wagner, and Banchero will be there, but also their newly signed veteran in KCP has been locked up. Wendell Carter has also been here. Anthony Black's a new rookie. Cole Anthony is also here. Jet Howard for some shooting, some young guys in Tristan De Silva, Jonathan Isaac, Mo Goga Batazde, but they do have some key free agents. Guys in Caleb Houston, who is a young guy on a team contract. Corey Joseph, who was starting for the Magic in the playoffs when a guy in Jalen Suggs went down on a team contract. And Mo Wagner, who dealt with an injury that sidelined him for the entire season in December, where he was a key vital piece for the Orlando Magic's defense in their first half of the year. When looking at some of these contracts, it does realize to me that the Magic do have to bring back some of these key guys, so in doing so, may have to obviously trade some guys on their roster. Now, when looking at their draft capital as well, the Orlando Magic do have 4 first-round picks, 4 draft picks in total, 2 firsts and 2 seconds. 16th pick and the 25th overall pick in this year's NBA draft in the first round, and the 46th pick and the 57th pick in the second round. With the Magic already having, with the Magic already having 11 guys under roster and, having some key free agents, I don't expect them to take 4 draft picks and to keep all 4 draft picks, which leads me to believe that they will use one of these draft picks in a trade to get better on their roster around the edges and maybe even get an upgrade at one of the positions that they were lacking in to add some more scoring and shooting, as like I mentioned was a key detriment for them in the playoffs and for the second half of the season. So let's dive in and let's explore what the Orlando Magic could potentially trade this off season to kind of get some of those upgrades. So I think the first player that kind of makes sense for the Magic if they want to get more shooting and get better at that is offering a guy in Cole Anthony. Now, Anthony was one of the first project pieces drafted to the Orlando Magic post Nikola Vucevic, post Aaron Gordon, post Evan Fournier Orlando Magic team a couple seasons ago, where they were kind of staying middling in the Eastern Conference. They finally stripped it down, went for that reset, and Anthony was one of those first pieces to really be brought in to kind of lead that new charge. And Cole Anthony was a solid, rookie as a shot creator and scorer, and has looked really good for the Orlando Magic. But in my opinion, I think his best role is as a 6th man. And for the Orlando Magic, who once again need some scoring and shooting in their starting lineup, a guy like Cole Anthony isn't going to provide that. And on a pretty solid contract, and with the Magic, like I mentioned, having these tradable contracts as well with these guys locked up on some of these deals, he could be thrown in with one of the draft picks and or another salary to go and get an upgrade at the starting 2 position to really make this a bolstering Magic team. There are some guys that have been listed out on the trade market that I think the Magic could upgrade at the 2 guard, guys like Kobe White, a guy in Anthony Simons, even potentially a guy in Grayson Allen on the fringes. I think could be a little bit of a better upgrade for this Magic team to add some more shooting and getting out some of these role players. And I think like a guy like Cole Anthony might have to be one of those pieces that gets moved on to another place. Once again, can still be a successful player there, maybe even turn into a quality level starter, or once again be moved in another deal to be a great quality six man where I think he'll truly shine in his true form on a top tier playoff team. The next guy I want to mention is Jonathan Isaac, and Jonathan Isaac has played very solid for this Orlando Magic team. Once again, was kind of one of those key foundation and building block guys. He was drafted, obviously, in that Nikola Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, Evan Fournier teams, where he was selected in the same draft class as Jason Tatum, and when he was selected at the 6th overall pick, was viewed to be the best defender in the draft class and could be one of the league's best defenders overall. Now, injuries have hindered Jonathan Isaac to really live up to that potential, but last season he had his healthiest of his career and looked absolutely outstanding in his limited role off the bench for the Magic as that 3-and-D wing. Obviously can play multiple positions as well with his frame and size, can slot in mainly as that power forward position, but can go a little bit in bigger lineups at the 3, or even can play the center position as well with his 6'10 frame and defensive instincts. I do think a guy like Isaac is a little bit out of the key rotation here, not to mention that the Magic already have key wings in Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero, their two building blocks, but also young guys in Tristan De Silva, who they just drafted, who's a solid offensive guy, Caleb Houston, who's also a solid offensive guy, and I do feel like kind of investing in those and bringing those guys back on those contracts and really trying to develop those wings is the direction this Magic team wants to go. A guy like Jonathan Isaac obviously has had a long tenure with the Orlando Magic and has been a great staple for their culture and identity, obviously a fan favorite, but ultimately has really fallen out of his role, and with younger wings kind of coming up and rising, and potentially the Magic even drafting a wing in this draft here, I think like a guy like Isaac is one of those sacrifices the Magic have to make to really get a key upgrade. Once again, can add some more shooting, can add some more size in the center department. Regardless of what the Magic want to do with a contract like Isaac, I do think his time is up in Orlando, but I wouldn't be shocked if he does stay. And another guy I want to talk about as well is Goga Bitadze. Similarly, like I mentioned with Jonathan Isaac, the Orlando Magic already have a guy in Mo Wagner who is a pretty solid rim-protecting defensive big, same qualities that Goga does bring. And with Mo Wagner being on a team contract and being on a more friendly contract, and with his brother also playing for the Orlando Magic and being a star, I think it is time for the Orlando Magic to really part ways with Goga Bitadze, as once again, he provided in that, second half stint with no Mo Wagner that he can be a great quality backup big, maybe even fringe starter as a defensive interior presence, shot blocker, and rim deterrent. I think at his value as well of $8 million on the trade market is also a very, very feasible tradable contract for the Orlando Magic to either trade into a team to, save some salary so they can use it to bring one of these guys back, and or they could use that to bring back another filler salary to play another key role on the fringes for them that they already have some good quality players. Once again, maybe if they do trade a guy like Jonathan Isaac and they trade a guy like Goga Bitadze and they get some shooting help, maybe they use a contract in Goga Bitadze to add some more wing depth on the fringes on like a $3, $4, $5 million deal just to give them a quality backup wing to play some filler minutes if needed. That's where I'm kind of looking with a Goga Bitadze trade here for the Orlando Magic. Once again, could still stay for the long haul. Not obviously bad to have two defensive backup bigs, but ultimately with the Orlando Magic already having a key one in Mo Wagner and Goga Bitadze ultimately having no role with Wendell Carter still being there, I think this is time for the Magic to move on from Goga. And then one other player I want to talk about from the Orlando Magic that I could see be getting traded because he didn't have the greatest season this year was KCP. He was brought in to be that shooting and defensive help that the Magic thought they were going to get with a veteran, and ultimately his shooting splits weren't the best with this team, wasn't the best fit, and in the playoffs obviously was not as consistent as we would have liked to see from a quality vet in KCP. But ultimately his contract would be the only reason why he's getting involved in trades, because he does make $22 million and would be one of the only tradable contracts or bigger tradable contracts outside of Franz Wagner, outside of Jalen Suggs, and outside of Paolo Banchero to make a big splash. Now, I do think, obviously, if they wanted to go out and get one of those big splash trade targets, someone that's kind of underrated at that point guard position, maybe a Darius Garland, maybe a Trae Young, you'd have to use a contract in Franz Wagner. But ultimately, if they want to go and get an upgrade similar like a Kobe White or an Anthony Simons, maybe a contract like KCP is utilized in that deal to shed off a big chunk of salary and only have to use one or two of their smaller contracts around the edges to also save save some other draft or tradable assets for the future or down the line. Once again, the Orlando Magic could also keep KCP and really hope that he can reinvent himself and bring himself back next season. But I do think the question marks around KCP on the trade market, if a quality guy does present himself that fills in for his role and could fill in for his contract, would be a big plus for the Magic. So now that we've talked about some potential trade targets for the Magic, let's talk about the draft, right? They have 4 picks, 16, 25, 46, and 57. Like I said, I don't necessarily know if they're going to keep both of these picks. I could see the Magic, once again, using pick 16 to go and getting a Kobe White or going and getting Anthony Simons if they feel like they need to use that. Or maybe even pick 25 to use to go get that and only keep one of these first-round picks. But I am going to look at 2 guys that I think would fall around their first pick, around pick 16, that I think can make some help or big upgrades for the Orlando Magic. And I lied, there are actually 3 guys, but the first one we're going to be looking at is Rasheer Fleming coming out of St. Joe's. The Magic, like I mentioned, love their wings and love these versatile guys, and a guy like Rasheer Fleming can once again fill in that role. If they want to move off of a guy in Caleb Houston on that team contract, which I don't think they will, it is a team contract, it is pretty cheap, they can bring him back. A guy like Rasheer Fleming, can help bridge that role and maybe performing a Jonathan Isaac trade. Obviously, a solid wing defender and scorer, and could really help translate, once again, kind of fighting for a role within the Orlando Magic, competing and being a guy behind Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner to take the next step. Guys like Tristan Da Silva and Caleb Houston have looked bright in some instances, but haven't been able to fully translate themselves to a quality role into that lineup. And Rasheer Fleming adds some versatility and size to some of that competition and bringing out the best of those 3 guys to really ultimately have the Magic have 1, 2, or maybe even 3 standout wings to come off the bench to help supplement those minutes when Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner need a rest. Now, this pick is a little bit of a long shot because I do think that Jace Richardson will be picked by pick 16, but with him having some flaws coming into the draft, being listed at 6 foot in shoes, those could be some concerns that push him out of the draft lottery. And for a team like Orlando, once again, who needs that scoring and needs that shooting at the guard position, maybe if they do not want to make a big splash or trade for a guy like Kobe White or Anthony Simons, or feel like that package is too large to be offering stuff, maybe this is where they go and they target a guy like Jace Richardson, who can be that combo scoring point guard off the bench for them. Once again, I think it is a little bit redundant because they already have a guy in Cole Anthony, and I feel like for the Magic, they need to take that big leap in getting that big-time scorer and going out and getting like a guy that's already proven himself in the league. But once again, a guy like Jace Richardson, if he slips to pick 16, could just fall into the lap with the Orlando Magic where they're saying, hey, we cannot pass this opportunity up. The talent is there. The fit can also work if we move off some of these contracts down the line, and we have to take what's best available, and Jace Richardson is that guy, and I would not fault the Magic for doing that as well. But also, I do think there are some concerns going into taking a Jace Richardson instead of obviously trading for an established scorer that could really help make an impact alongside Banchero and Franz Wagner immediately. And then lastly, because they do like wings and they do need shooting, why not a guy like Liam McNeely from UConn? I know he's kind of been sporadic all over the boards, right? He was kind of projected to go around late lottery at some earlier points of the draft combine or at the earlier points of the draft process. Now has seemingly fallen down a little bit with a lot of these kind of late gems or hidden risers really pushing themselves up the rankings with all these new faces really watching their film and breaking them down. So a guy like McNeely has kind of slipped. And once again, at pick 16, I think would be a pretty solid pick. But even if they did trade pick 16 and if they had him at pick 25, where he could also be seen on some mock drafts, I think this is the perfect selection for the Orlando Magic. Once again, has that wing frame size that you desperately need, but also provides that wing scoring and shooting that the Orlando Magic could desperately need as well. Now, once again, that shooting that they need for this offense doesn't need to necessarily come at the guard position. It can come realistically from anywhere. So adding multiple shooters and multiple scorers alongside this defensive, cohesive mechanism that is the Orlando Magic, I think is going to be key. And a guy like McNeely at pick 16, I think would be a pretty good pick. But even at pick 25 would be an even better pick for the Magic to, once again, even if they do trade for an all-out guy for offense, just getting another supplementary offensive scorer at pick 25 would be insane for the Orlando Magic. So once again, the Magic, lots of questions, very interesting offseason for them. Personally, like I said, I do see them rising in this Eastern Conference next season. They dealt with some injuries, finished 41-41 at 7th, and I do not think that that's where they're going to fall this upcoming season, especially if they make some of those moves like I was talking about, going out and getting some of those scorers or all-time big-time stars that can help alongside Paolo Banchero, I think the Orlando Magic can take that insane leap. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let me know what you guys ultimately think on the Orlando Magic. Are you as high on them as I am this offseason, or do you guys think they're going to kind of sit pat and just kind of stay in the middle? Once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching these videos here. We've been rising with the subscribers as of late. It's been absolutely insane to see how much support you guys have been actually giving on these, videos. So it really does mean a lot. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. I'll catch you guys tomorrow in another offseason breakdown as we lead up to the draft. We've been doing one every single day. And then once trades and other news and free agency signings and the draft happens, we'll definitely have some more content revolving around that too. But once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.